Like, sod trying to make yourself fit in for your employer. You find an employer that fits in for you. It's simple. And the thing is, you just have to value yourself enough to realize that it's okay the way that you are. That's the true transformation that's going on beneath that. Welcome to the Dyslexia in Adults podcast, where we share advice on what works with dyslexia to ensure that you're able to achieve your potential. You won't believe this, but we just hit 100,000 downloads. So to make sure that we're able to share this advice with even more people, we would really appreciate it if you could just leave us a review or share this episode with a friend. But more importantly, we have a very special secret gift as a thank you for listening in the show notes. Today's podcast is going to be a little bit different. I'm here with a few members of the Hive who have undergone some amazing transformations with their dyslexia. And as part of our mission for dyslexia in adults is to share the reality of living with dyslexia. And who better to hear it from than people just like you? Okay, so first off, we're going to have a small introduction from everyone so you can hopefully see yourself in their story. Kira, do you want to start?
Yeah. Hi, so I'm Kiara. I am an HR professional and I've been doing that for about 7 years now. I was first diagnosed really young. All my family, apart from my dad, are dyslexic. So my mum, when I was 4, knew something. She knew that I would be dyslexic
It
too.
was always going to be
And
going that way. Yeah.
yeah, and originally the school refused to diagnose me because I was so young. So my mum fortunately went and took the private test and subsequently, yes,
The
dyslexic.
rest is
And
history. Oh, so
throughout
not a million miles away from me. I was 6, so like same kind of age.
So hi, my name is Amanda. I was diagnosed really young. Like ever since I can remember, I've always been in like a reading class of some kind. So like really young in grade school. Um, but I actually never knew what it was until after I got my college degree because
Mm,
all anyone would ever tell me was, "Oh, you have a learning disability or you have a reading disability."
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it was not fun going through school.
And do you think that your
Um,
parents knew, or do you think that they didn't know either? Sometimes people's parents do know and they don't tell them.
I think my mom knew, she just didn't understand it.
Got you.
Because it is written on my IEP papers, and that's how I found out because I finally went through that stuff and
Interesting. So
I don't
halfway through
remember
college or like at the end of college?
after I got my associate's degree.
Oh, bless. Oh, that's so
Mhm.
frustrating. Yeah,
Just a
do you know what?
bit.
You're not the first person I've heard it for a similar story where like people knew but they didn't know and like they didn't say, and yeah, it's actually incredibly common. I hear it quite often. And so, Kira, I'd love to hear, like, for you, you're a slightly newer member of the Hive. Like, what would you describe, like, before you joined at the end of last year? Like, where were you kind of at? How would you describe your dyslexia? And, it's okay to describe it as like a challenge that you couldn't really describe, because I think that's how a lot of people feel. So just whatever you really feel, we'd love to hear.
Yeah, so I would say a couple of years ago I read my first book on dyslexia, and
Which
it's
one?
made me start to kind of understand the strengths because I think when people understand when people hear about dyslexia, it's always the negatives and the struggles. It's never, oh, but they're super creative or they're great problem solving skills. So it was kind of then I decided I'd really love to learn more about this. And I actually found dyslexia in adults through Spotify going dyslexia, and then I upvoted your podcast, and
Oh,
then it kind of went
amazing.
from there.
Which book were you reading?
The Kate Griggs, This is
The Katie
Dyslexia.
Griggs book is
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, yeah. Interesting. Okay. And Rena, let's hear about you.
Hi, I'm a hidden disabilities and neurodiversity champion, coach, mentor, and textile designer. So I wasn't diagnosed until I was at university, so in my 20s. A lot of struggles and challenges.
And so tell me a little bit about what the challenges you feel like you're facing now. Like what is it as an adult that made you think, you know what, I got to do something about this?
I think my overwhelm, I would say, and the kind of kind of tasking. I think also the way I kind of have all these ideas and not knowing what to start off with. It might not be the classic ones, but like
They're
compared,
definitely the classics.
are they okay?
Yeah.
I think compared to when I was a child, which was more reading and writing and spelling in
Yeah.
particular, I never paid attention to actually reading books. I didn't want to pick up the book. The first book was Harry Potter, actually. And yeah, I would say it's kind of has moved on since then, I would say, my challenges. And I'm a mum of two very active boys. So
That'll definitely do it on the overwhelm side of things. Yeah. I was on the Dyslexia Explored podcast, and one of the things he says that a lot of people come to him is they get to adulthood and, you know, they've got a career, they've got they've got life going on, and now they've got kids, and they just don't have the time to manage their dyslexia like they used to. Like, you know, things take them longer, and they just don't have, they're just so time poor that they don't have the ability to manage things like they used to. And that's like one of the things that pushes people into finding more help. So yeah, it's definitely really common. Having 1,000 ideas and figuring out how to articulate them, get started on them, learning how to multitask without multitasking, all ones we hear every day. So yeah, thank you for sharing. What about you, Amanda? What would you say now that you're outside of education, you're like, I just want my brain to be able to do this?
Well, to be honest, I really never noticed how much it was affecting my life until I want to say quite recently. I know you had mentioned, I think it was on Instagram, that now that we've heard of what our dyslexia can be, like we're starting to see it more.
That was on TikTok, yeah.
Yes. And so since hearing that, like it made more sense to like, oh, okay, that's why I'm able to point it out a little bit better. But like now that I know what's truly like a symptom of it, because again, I always thought of it as just reading and writing, never thought anything different, didn't know anything different. It wasn't until I found your podcast that I really started to look more into it.
Yeah. And I think the thing that I wanted to get across on that TikTok, which I did a half-assed job of, is for me, now that I understand my neurodiversity, not only do I see the things more regularly and clearer, but I feel capable of struggling with them externally, whereas before I was internally struggling with them. Before I was really clear on what exactly was going on, what exactly the challenges were. And for anyone that hasn't seen the TikTok, it was relating to like a recent discovery of ADHD alongside my dyslexia. I think I started to realize it was the case at 28, and at 30 I was like, oh no, this thing is raging inside my soul. And it's only once I really understood what exactly ADHD was, I felt like I could externally show those challenges that I felt. Just a perfect example is like I've always struggled to really sit still, and I remember like the first year at the dyslexia show, just like sitting down and just being like, just stay still, Natalie, just stay still, just stay still. And then the second year I was kind of like a little bit more wobbly, and then the third year I was just kind of like at the back, just half paying attention, half fiddling, half kind of listening, you know, and enjoying myself so much more. So I feel like I can outwardly struggle now, which is something that really has been so life-changing. And even though you're still struggling, you're not struggling with the masking as well. The thing that I always describe it as is like with dyslexia and ADHD and any neurodiversity, you've got a backpack of problems. Like we've got working memory issues, we've got processing issues, we've got difficulties explaining our ideas, we've got difficulty organizing our thoughts. And there's all these bricks in this backpack. And then you're adding shame, masking, frustration, embarrassment, all these extra other bricks, like as if I want to carry that around as well. I've got enough bricks that I've got hauling around. I don't need one more. So that was kind of the thought process behind that TikTok. I'm glad that it connected. Is there anything that you've learned recently that you thought it's that specific thing?
In what sense of it? Like in a positive or
Whatever springs to mind.
this drive to always like be perfect at work. I'm recently self-employed, and so now that like I remember that first day, just the feeling of not having to be perfect and just
Mm,
not feeling so overwhelmed was like a weight lifted off my shoulders.
yeah, for
And like
sure.
now that I'm hearing more like about why I was feeling that way, it was making more sense. Like, okay, that's why I would get upset when I wasn't in trouble, but it felt like I was in trouble for something.
Mm, mm.
Um, and just always trying to be perfect, making sure I always had my spelling right. Uh, sorry, allergies are getting me right now.
No worries.
Um, yeah, I would say that.
I think that's a great example that so many people are going to really appreciate hearing. And for the people who are listening to this and thinking like, yes, that is me. She's nailed my challenges. The thing that, self-employment is a great opportunity for neurodiverse people, and we're not trying to hide that fact. But for the people who are like, but I like my job, but I want to work in my company, but I want to not have to give up my entire career for this challenge. The thing that we say to people is, right now, you're having to give 120% because of your neurodiversity, and that is absolutely exhausting. So, if you are right now having to give 120%, what about you give 80%? You still, as a neurodiverse person, want to give it all, want to work hard, want to try your best, but we don't have to give 120%. We can give 20%, and we can give 80%, and we can get the additional 20% supported through technology, through our company, through our team, through our bosses. And so one of the examples I often give in this example is, you might be really, really good at curating the ideas for a report, and you might be really, really capable at thinking about how to explain those ideas and how to get them down. Maybe you need a little bit of help on phrasing them and making sure that the writing is really, really crisp. So you could do 80% of the report. The final 20% of checking something could be the thing that you get support on. And that last 20% of perfectionism around your sentence structure, your spelling, your phrasing, maybe some of it going a little bit unwieldy, is the thing that you could get help with, that probably is the thing that's taking you the longest. It's taking you 3 days, that urge for perfect. And that's what we recommend. You can still take pride and effort in your work, but you don't have to go 120% of it. You can just do 80% and be proud of yourself. But I applaud the self-employment journey. It's Rena and Katie will be able to tell you it's a long road, but like it's one that's filled with so many amazing highs. Some lows, but really amazing, the highest of highs. So I think that'd be a really nice like segue and to bring in Kiara. So what, in terms of that side of perfectionism and managing that in an employment place right now, how does that feel? Where do you feel like you're at on that journey? Is that something that's really kind of causing a lot of struggle?
I would say when you're choosing who your employer is, I think you've got to kind of, like in your interview webinar, you've got to ask them questions that assess like how flexible they are with dyslexia, and that will shape what your experience with an organisation's like. I think it is hard, like you say, having those when you need a break, but your workload's like what it is, or you've got meetings, or you're a very regimented schedule. But I think if you can join an employer who's branded like flexible hours, maybe I know I seem to work better post 5:30, so there's
Mm.
times where I can think, right, I need to have a brain break. I'll make that up at the other end of the day. But I've actually I've the last 3 years been working at home, and I've actually found that really good for my dyslexia because I can have speech to text, and I can not get distracted by other people's conversations in an office and things like that. So I think that I think going forward, I think that works for me. I'm an incredibly social person, so it is a bit of a conflict. But I think
Mm.
overall, to make my dyslexia better, I think working remotely gives me one, the flexibility, and two, the brain space to make it
Yeah,
happen.
and absolute gold star for your answer of like it's not about you changing, it's about you finding the right employer that fits for you. Like my heart was so proud. I was like, yes, that is exactly what I wanted you to say. So for anyone who is listening and wondering what the transformations look like in person at the Hive, it's exactly those kind of statements. Like sod trying to make yourself fit in for your employer, you find an employer that fits in for you. It's simple. And the thing is, you just have to value yourself enough to realize that it's okay the way that you are. That's the true transformation that's going on beneath that. Um, I really, really loved that you pulled that out and said that. And I think you're right. Working from home does give you that flexibility without really having to like shout it from the rooftops. One of the things that I always say to people is you don't really have to say dyslexia. Like you can if you want, and if you really need to and you feel really comfortable to, then that's okay. But also, it's all right to just be like, I prefer working from home. I prefer the opportunity to have more flexible hours. And this is something that lots of people value, lots of people appreciate, lots of people are looking for. Yeah, you can use the card of dyslexia if you think it's going to get you a few more points, if it's going to encourage you to really say things, but you can also just request those things. I think that was, yeah, such a valuable answer. Thank you so much. Brina, you've been working from home from a while now if you're self-employed, and you were talking about multitasking earlier. How do you find the whole multitasking, getting your to-do list done, getting through things, particularly working from home? And it's okay if the answer is like, I don't.
I'm winging it most of the time. Winging it,
Mm,
that's the right word. Sometimes they're good. Some days are like I'm really focused. Some days it's harder with the kids. Because not only I only have to remember what my calendar is saying, but also the children's calendar. When they've got the PE, when they've got after school club, when they have. So
mm,
they've got a whole different separate calendar that I
mm,
have to remember, and I'm getting pings on the WhatsApp at the same time with like, don't forget, I don't know, there's a school trip today, for instance, I had to be there at 8:30, not normal time at 8:45. So it was like a lot of pre-prep. I find that when I pre-prep, I'm okay.
mm.
But in terms of the memory side of things is probably like going back to now that the first question, the memory side of things is probably the hardest thing for me because there's so much for me to remember.
Yeah, sure. I think we recently re-engineered some stuff as to how our team works because we mostly communicate all through WhatsApp because Casey's based in America, Amy's based in Cape Town, Michael's based in the like Midlands of England. So I'm getting WhatsApps from, and I mean, God knows what country I'm in and what day. So I'm getting WhatsApps from them like all across the day and at all different times. And I had to say like, enough with the constant WhatsApping. I can't answer all your questions at once. I get nothing done because I spend my life replying to you all. Um, and I think one of the things I realized is I needed to like bucket their work as its own bucket and be like, okay, so I need to do my work, I need to like do their work, and it needs to be less ad hoc. I need it kind of like all in one place so I can just look at it, go to it, get what I need when I have like an hour that I can do. Now, I appreciate that's harder with the school when they're just sending you the ad hoc WhatsApp updates, but that's one of the
Yeah.
things we just
I do tend
recently,
to mute it though. I tend to mute it during the day because, like
yeah,
you said, all you're doing is responding to messages. So I put it on like a focus mode on my phone.
yeah, I have
It
to do
tends
that as
to be
well.
just my work, and then after
One
that,
of the things I've learned to really protect is my focus. And I know that it takes me so long to close my mind down into focusing
Mm.
that I really protect when I am in those states, when I am getting in that mindset. I know that I need to have my phone on focus mode. I know that I need to like have my music playing. I know that I need to have a clean desk so that my head isn't distracted and just stay focused, stay working, stay in one section and bucketing the work that I'm doing. We call it, well, it's called monotasking. So I'm doing multiple things throughout the day, but I'm doing one task, then another task, then another task. And the entirety of April, I found that I was kind of here, there, and everywhere, here and there, and everywhere. And then I was kind of like, we had our monthly retrospective yesterday with Katie, Monday even. And I was like, Katie, I can't do this anymore. Please don't make me work like this anymore. I'm gonna. And she was like, okay, step back from the stress. It's really not that bad. I was like, it really is that bad though. I can't. I got this many posts and this, and then I'm checking your work, and she was like, it's really, really. You just need to calm. We'll take some work off your plate. So yeah, I think trying to find ways to mentally bucket your work has really helped me deal with that. Even if there's 1,000 things on, it's like I'm doing this bucket, then I'm doing this bucket, then I'm doing this bucket has really helped me. So one of the things we're very aware of is that if you feel alone with your dyslexia, or you feel like you are really frustrated and embarrassed and you don't know anyone else who's dyslexic, you don't really open up and talk about it, it can be incredibly difficult to manage your dyslexia. But more importantly, it can be really hard to implement a lot of the things that we're talking about. A lot of the challenges really come from consistent implementation of what we're talking about, the ideas that we suggest. You know, it's one thing listening to a podcast and like hearing some ideas, but actually coming home, remembering to do them in the moment, remembering to get started, remembering to change the way you're working. We think community is a really, really important part of creating that change and helping people implement things, giving you accountability to like stay on the journey. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on how you're finding implementing some of the ideas, some of the frustrations you have right now on implementing. Amanda, what are your thoughts about like actually implementing some of the ideas?
For the better part, like if they're my own ideas, it's easier to implement than trying to learn something new, because then you're getting metaphors from other people and not really the how to do it. And so
Yeah.
when you're not getting that step by step, it makes it harder for you to go, okay, well, now what?
Mm,
You know, and when you go back to them for that help, it's like, well, I don't get it. And it's embarrassing because you just got off of a call with them and everything was great. And then in messages, it just was like, wait, what happened?
I think that's really fair. What about you, Kira? How would you describe like the implementation side of things?
I think I think it's difficult to remember to use tech. I know that
Mm,
sounds really silly, but it's you sit there like with a blank screen in front of you and think, oh, I've got to write this big all company email or whatever it may be. And you're getting more and more frustrated at yourself, like, oh, why can everyone else do this, but I can't do this? And you end up feeling like you're making like a big deal out of nothing. But it's just the way that your brain processes. So trying to like stop yourself when you are struggling, go, okay, what tech can I use to improve
slowing
things?
yourself down, I think is the key there. Just
Mm.
actually thinking to yourself, hang on, I'm in the middle of this struggle. I shouldn't have to be struggling like this. What is it that I need to do to create change? Exactly like you said, just not suffering reading the document alone is really important. And then what about you, Renna?
That's interesting about the tech stuff. I think for me, the first thing is that my nervous system is regulated, because if
I
it's
love
not,
that.
I am out of whack and nothing's gonna get done. So I come
Mm,
back to my breath a lot. And I think because I've had that, I've had a year's experience with the yoga and breathing and teaching it, I kind of like, let's practice what you preach. So if I get myself in a kerfuffle, I really just I actually have to go outside in the garden or get some fresh air, like have the sun on my face and just really go, right, what's the one thing you can get done today that's gonna
mm.
move that needle? And that's my kind of thing.
I don't know if you remember the executive functions talk we did in the Hive and about how you're turning on and off your executive functions. That's what that is. When you are getting overwhelmed, flustered, there's too much going on, your executive functions are going offline and therefore you're not able to use those
Mm.
skills of planning and prioritization, organizing your thoughts, remembering what you need to remember. And so going and centering yourself and thinking about what you need brings back online all of those skills that, you know, we often really struggle with as neurodiverse people. So it's not just a fluffy thing. It's like it's grounded in neuroscience, like how valuable that really is.
Can I just say on top of that, because I hadn't actually seen that yet, I completely forgot you did that whole session on the executive function, which I will now definitely go and watch back. But it's amazing how our bodies actually know what we need.
Yeah.
If we listen and tune in, that we're doing that anyway, if we listen. So that's really interesting that you said that. Thanks for reminding me.
Yeah. Katie, I'm going to put you on the spot. What is your suggestions for implementation, and what do you think about trying to create change and change your habits? Because you've gone on a really big journey in the last 2 years of trying to change your approach and change your habits and be more respectful of your neurodiversity.
I would say the thing that's helped me over the past couple of years really implement some of the changes and techniques and strategies is honestly patience and knowing that I'm not going to get it right every time. So, and reflection, patience and reflection. So I will be in a situation where I'm starting to burn out and I can feel it. And I will be like, oh, I should have talked to myself like a week ago and started the 80-20, technique a while back then. And then I stop myself from being angry with me and really focus on implementing the 80-20 from that minute forward, rather than sitting there and just stewing on it and stewing on it. So instead of being mad at myself, I take the time to reflect and reset and implement the strategy no matter when.
Love that. I think that's beautiful. Okay, so last question. We try and keep these podcasts as short as possible for you. We know attention spans can be a challenge. So lastly, to everyone, what is your one piece of advice you would give to someone who is newly diagnosed with dyslexia, or something that you think that every dyslexic person should know, either from your own experiences or something you have learned in the Hive? Katie, you go first.
I'm not supposed to be part of this. For me, I think that the coin theory, and if somebody else wants to steal this, they can. I think that the coin theory is really what set me over the edge to really discovering more about me. And so I learned this in the Hive. I would encourage people to think about every dyslexic struggle you have and find the opposite strength. Because for every time you're struggling with something, there really is, I promise, something good about dyslexia. You just have to find it. And that's the hard part. So
You love that
if,
one. You always reference that
yeah,
example.
I do. I
And
love it.
the coin theory is the thing that helped me come to terms with the fact that I have an extremely low attention to detail. So I have a really bad attention to detail, but that is because the opposite side of the coin is I see the big picture. So I do really struggle with attention to detail, but I am so, so grateful for my ability to see the big picture. And although I wish every single day I had a better attention to detail, I would never, never rob my ability to see the big picture from myself. That is like my greatest gift that I've been given in life. And I would feel heartbroken if that was taken from me. So that's how the coin theory was born. What was the one that we were talking about yesterday, Katie, where you were like, that's coin theory, baby, that's what you get? And I was like, you were telling me off for something, and I was like, yeah. And you were like, this is what you get. I can't remember what it was.
We were talking about how many ideas that I constantly have and how many ideas you constantly have. And I think I was trying to rein you in, and you were like, oh, but we could do this or we could do this. And I was like, this is the problem you get. This is the good side of dyslexia that becomes the bad side, right? Like we generate so many ideas constantly. I forget exactly what the situation was. I think you were
No, I think it was about me saying that I love that you take the initiative on things. And then you were like, yeah, well, that's the other side of the coin, because you're like always nagging me on stuff, and you're like, well, that's
oh,
what that is. I think it was that.
yes. That
Yeah.
and take the initiative is my mother's fault as well, but
Yeah.
that's a different side of that coin.
Amanda, what about you? What would you say your like quick thing that you'd love people to know?
Don't be hard on yourself.
Beautiful. That's perfect.
You know, we're not perfect.
No one
Nobody
is.
is. And so
Snap.
just to not be hard on yourself, because at the end of the day, you can't change who you are in that aspect. So it's better to embrace it, learn your coping mechanisms, to not let it affect you in a negative way.
Beautiful. Kiara?
I think mine kind of bounces off Katie and Amanda's a bit. I think, well, first of all, everyone's feelings with their dyslexia or how far along the like acceptance road they are, they're valid. You know, we've all gone through highs and lows of dyslexia, and that's perfectly fine. I think something that helped me recently was with my 1 hour call with Natalie was actually realizing what my strengths are. So I just advise anyone, okay, why don't you ask a friend, a family member, a colleague, what do they think your strengths are? Because I think that helps you realize them yourself and then just vouch for yourself on that front. And when you're faced with, oh, I'm having this problem because of my dyslexia, or I, like for instance, time blindness, oh, I can't deliver on deadlines because of time blindness, but I can give you a really good overall big picture thinking, creative ideas, and just things like that. I think when you've kind of heard someone else say it about you, it actually makes you realize it yourself and you're not so self-critical.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you'd be surprised how people see you versus how you see yourself. Like you're so frustrated at some things and people just don't even see that in you at all. And for anyone being like, there is no way I would do that, because we got that suggestion actually on another podcast interview that we did. And I was like, I just want to remind everyone that I did this. I have done this actually many times now. I actually did it to Katie like last weekend, but I did it about 3 years ago when I was like, I don't know what my dyslexic strengths are. And everyone was like, you give amazing advice, amazing advice. And that's always the one that I say to dyslexic people. I bet your friends think you give amazing advice because we see things differently, see like little opportunities or little ways of thinking at things that people really appreciate. And then Rena, what would you say yours is?
Just echoing actually what everyone else has really been saying, really. I think leaning into your strength, because you have like this special uniqueness about yourself that's waiting to be unlocked. And I think that's something which I'm really feel so passionate about. And kind of learning like almost like a muscle to kind of really fully embrace who you are and celebrate it.
Yeah, I love that. Is there anything particular about your strengths that you particularly embrace, that you're particularly proud of, just so people can kind of anchor that into something specific?
So my creativity and my imagination and my self-expression, I firmly believe in doing this daily to be fully expressed, and my creativity. Yeah, I would say.
I love that. I think that's beautiful. Thank you so much, everyone. That is everything. I really appreciate it. I hope everyone enjoyed this podcast, and thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate it. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Dyslexia in Adults podcast. Whether or not this is your first listen or your 100th, I am so grateful that you decided to entrust me with this challenge. If you enjoyed this week's episode, I would really appreciate it if you could review and subscribe to the podcast, because it really helps us to reach more people.